Alright folks, how you doing? So from the last video, it almost looks like Jed Skeptic was right all along, that Scotland was taken over by, foreigners who took over the land, da 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 da.
Almost, not quite.
And in this video I'll explain why. It all boils down to one term, and that's Phoenician. Now, we're back in the book here, chapter 6 of When Scotland Was Jewish, and saying here, when did Jews arrive in Scotland? So let's have a look. Several sources posit that persons from the Levant, North Africa, and even Italy had visited southwestern England, near Cornwall before the Common Era. There were rich tin mines in this region that were exploited by the early Phoenicians, 800 BCE, who traded with ports from France and northern Africa to Italy and Greece. Because the Judeans, Jews, often worked with the Phoenicians as trading partners, some could have reached Britain as early as this time. The demography of Cornwall still attests to a significant incidence of J and E3 genes in the region. I would go even further than that. I would say that the Jews were the Phoenicians, because they shared like a common language, they shared the same alphabet, everything. So, most people don't quite go that far. They get up to worked with, but they don't say they're the same, but I think they are the same. Anyway, according to Brooks, there are numerous well-established geographical links between the Hebrews of the Mediterranean and peoples of the British Isles. The early name of what is now Cornwall and Devon in southwestern England was Dumnoi or Dammoni. Oh, sorry, I mispronounced that. Dunmoni or Danmoni, which antiquarians have glossed as meaning Dan's tin mines. Among others, the distinguished Semitic studies professor Cyrus Gordon suggested that this name, seen also in the Irish myth of the Tuatha tribe Daidanan, was identical with that of the biblical tribe of Dan. Finally, the Celtic scholar John Rhys assembled strong evidence of Hebrew colonization of Britain in early times. Ireland was known as Iberion, and the ancient name of the Israelites was Ibri or Iberi, derived from the proper name Eber or Heber, the eponymous ancestors of that people. Now, what was that saying about the Picts? What they really called themselves? They called themselves Iberi. Very interesting. So there's a lot of connections between the ancient Picts and the Jews, what we think of as the Jews today. And when you read the Commons Beaumont, Britain, the Key to World History, and his other books, this is covered actually by Jed on his channel. He covered all this. Would suggest you go check those videos out if they're still up on his channel. But he covers all this with Britain, the Key to World History. And by the way, Jed at one point made some very, very good videos. I just think his channel's kind of gone off the cliff in more recent times, but that's neither here nor there. Now, if we skip forward to this part here in the chapter notes for chapter 1 here, let's have a look at what it says here. This is pretty interesting. Scotland even lacks an agreed upon history of its place names. It has been pointed out its landscape glacial and volcanic at once, with marine fossils in the Grampian Mountains and some of the deepest lakes in the world, was so bewildering that the modern science of geology had to be created to explain it. Two archaeological marvels are distinctively Scottish: the Brochs, which you got up in the Shetlands, I've seen them, stone towers, and Cranog's lake fortresses. While all Scotland's major rivers and firths show evidence of having been bridged with a network of highways prior to the Roman arrival. Exactly, Commons Beaumont talks about that. Modern day attempts to etymolise many of Scotland's oldest place names, however, are conflicting because no consensus has emerged on the country's underlying chronology of settlement. Does the name Douglas derive from dark, stranger, black water, or one from Gaul? It depends on what you believe was the original language: Scottish Gaelic, some other Gaelic, English, or French. Does the name for Tiree, one of the islands of the Inner Hebrides, come from Gaelic Tur Iod, land of corn, or Tur what's that? Tur Fo Thuan, land below the waves, or was the original name something else in a different language? Curiously, most of Scotland's islands bear names that were apparently given in the Greek language. Now that is very interesting when you get into Beaumont and his books. Very interesting. Hebrides equals Hebrew islands. Orkneys, island of the whales. Skye, island of the Scythians. Check out David Allen Ritchie's We the Scythians, by the way. Iona, Jonah's island. Tyre, island of the Phoenician sea goddess Tyre, the Phoenician goddess. Mull, island of black lead. Yet no Greek-speaking inhabitants have ever been documented, much less proposed in Scotland's entire history. Again, check out Jed Skeptic's channel where he talks about all that with Britain, the key to world history. I won't cover this on that channel because he did an excellent job in covering that book on his channel. Anyway, getting to the second set of footnotes here. Picts, painted people, was the name given by the Romans to the indigenous people who they found when they conquered Britain in the 1st century. Their language is presumed to have been Celtic, a distant cousin of Latin and major branch of the Indo-European language group. Now, how many places do you read that the Celtic language is related to Latin? Very interesting. That's why I like this book. You know, it's really bringing a lot of things to the surface, things that which even they don't go as far as Beaumont does. And Beaumont was alive decades ago. You know, he discovered all this 60, 70, 80 years ago. You know, and only now we're getting sources that are catching up. In the 18th century, historians discovered evidence of a link between Celtic and Phoenician, the Semitic language of ancient Carthage. Among the plays of the Roman author Plautus is a work called Penulus, Phoenician, in which the dramatist placed a specimen of then current Phoenician into the mouth of one of his characters. The similarity between the Phoenician of Plautus and early Irish Celtic was first proposed by Thomas More in his History of Ireland, and accepted by scholars such as Charles Vallancey, Lord Ross, and Sir William Betham. Modern language scholars have confirmed the link, which tends to support an early settlement of England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland by a Mediterranean and Semitic Hamitic people, the Phoenicians. In other words, the Jews. The Jews have been here for a long, long time, believe me, and it's not just recently either. And there's scholars, even Jewish scholars, because I believe there's one of the authors of this book's Jewish, who are starting to catch up on that. And it's very interesting. Therefore, we can say that in a multitude of ways, the Celts and Hebrews bear a remarkable relationship. Since the Celts were spread over most of Europe, the cultural, historical, and religious implications are immensely significant. Now, this shouldn't be in the footnotes. This should be out front and centre. In fact, if you look into Hollywood actors, a lot of them who are Scottish or British, they're often married in with Jewish husbands or wives. Like, for example, Ewan McGregor, his first wife was Jewish. Things like that. If you look at J.J. Abrams, the surname of his wife would be another example. I believe they're related, probably somewhat distantly, but I believe that the Celtic races are connected with the Hebrew and Jewish races, the Phoenicians. And that connection goes back a very long way. I'm still wrapping my head around it. I don't fully understand it. I'd be lying if I said that I did. But, you know, I remember I was listening the other day to a Michael Dazarian podcast. I don't think it was an Enslaved, though. I think it was before all that, where he talks about symbols that you think of as Jewish were Celtic in origin. I would take it one step further. I would say that what you think of as Celtic and or Jewish goes all the way back to Phoenician. You know, and they're basically offshoots of the Phoenician race. Seems to be what all this evidence is hinting at, you know, quite loudly as well. But that's interesting there. So when you see all these Norman, you know, and Flemish lords coming in with the Davidian Revolution being appointed to the land, you know, as much as what happens is evidence, it's also what doesn't happen, if that makes sense. You notice there's no massive revolts or uprisings or anything like that when all these Norman Flemish lords come in. There's no peasant revolts, none that I'm aware of, at least. If you know of any, point it out in the comments. I'll have a look. But you notice that they just kind of seem to settle in, sort of thing. There's no big fuss made over it, none that I'm aware of. Like I said, well, why do you think that is? And when you look at the waves of migration that Tazarian talks about in his works, you can put it all together. And, in books like Ignatius Donnelly and all that sort of thing. Atlantis, the antediluvian world. Rita Jean Morgan would be another one when she talks about the Chronides, etc. So we've only just begun to scratch the surface of this topic, but these the authors of this book have done an excellent job of pointing all this out, but they're just catching up to Collins Beaumont, funnily enough. Now, I don't agree with absolutely everything that Beaumont says, but I do think a lot of it is eyebrow raising. And also David Allen Ritchie with We the Scythians. You can get that book, I think, on archive.org. It was up there the last time I checked. And if you go to lulu.com, I think it's even on Amazon these days, you can buy the works of Beaumont. I bought all of them, by the way, incidentally, while I was living in Russia. I used to go to work hours early, hoping that the postman would come that day with a book, and I would just sit and read for hours, and it was fascinating. But anyway, thank you very much for watching.